This is Making Better Decisions. I'm your host, Ryan Sullivan. Decisions are where rubber meets the road for organizations. Each week, we'll be learning from people who are on the front lines of turning raw data into better outcomes for their organizations. This show is sponsored by Canopy Analytic, helping companies make better decisions using data. Welcome, everybody, to the Making Better Decisions podcast. Today's guest is a capable and dynamic engineering leader with vast experience in operations and capital equipment. Looks to expand his experience in growing technical product business in innovative and high-velocity environments. He also has a strong technical background with significant customer development experience. Please welcome Senior Director of Software and Technology at JBT Automated Systems, Darren O'Reilly.
Thank you.
So I want to start off with the same question that I've been starting everyone off with, which is what is one thing you wish more people knew about using data to make better decisions?
All right. Well, that's the loaded question of the millennium here, right?
Yeah.
Um, I I think for me, just off of my experience, and we'll get into it later, but I've worked in a lot of different industries throughout my career. Is that more data isn't necessarily translates to more results. It's about understanding truly the uh, the right data and understanding what you're trying to actually figure out as a problem and how to you know really draw conclusions from that. I think in my experience, it's been as like this whole IoT revolution and big data has grown. It's that you know certain customers come to you and they say, "Well, we need all this data from you," and they don't necessarily know what they're going to do with the data. They just want it. And
Hmm.
so I think the real challenge is really helping to work with the customers to really understand what they're trying to do with the data and help them be successful with it. Because I think the big thing is that if you can help your customers be successful in their business, you're going to be successful in your business.
100%. Yeah. I like that a lot. I both in my own consulting experience and from talking to folks here on the podcast, there are kind of a couple different categories of places, right, where people are using data. So they may just be, hey, I'm going to pull something together to make a business decision for myself, or it might be I'm building something for, the sales team so they know where to go, to target people. I really like getting to discuss with you the use case of actually providing data and reporting to clients kind of
Right.
across that boundary.
Right.
And, you know, from having done this for a little while, I'm totally with you. Having 500 reports is almost the same as having no reports.
Yep.
I think you really hit the nail on the head. Like, what is the customer's goal? How are they trying to succeed?
Right.
And if they can't quickly and easily get the information that they need to do that, then, you know, they're kind of in a tough situation. So, based on some of your experience drawing from having been in a lot of different types of jobs, what are some of the places that you've seen data make a real impact for folks?
Um, you know, I, I'd say like one thing that just kind of comes to mind is when I worked for a company in the semiconductor capital equipment business. One of the things was is that really trying to understand like you know actuations of certain parts and really tracking when these parts are going to start to fail and really kind of starting to dig in and look at it and apply like machine learning type algorithms to it to really extract things like anomaly detection onto this data and actually really understand what's really going on and what's really relevant as far as when we're going to start seeing failures happen before they happen and stop the catastrophic failures of things like you know pumps and stuff failing on a wet process
Mm.
semiconductor tool. So, and again, that was like one of the things that was I was able to do with a couple of partners in the mix is like really understand like something that was going from, 500 some major parameters coming in and actually understanding that it was about 13 or 14 that were actually relevant for determining what was going on in the system.
Mm,
And so that's just one example, but it boils down to what I do today in the AGV world as well, where we have a lot of big customers that, have a big push to get lots and lots of data, but it's working to really understand with them, you know, what are you trying to really get out of this? Is this something that you're trying to do optimization of some sort? Are you trying to understand uh, where your failures are, but why are you failing? I mean, it's like one of those things where you got to go and work to drive intelligence and how you evaluate things, and some of it might be is just in the way that you provide diagnostic, and that you know
mm,
it's not every diagnostic is equal, and yeah, driving from just counts of diagnostics to actually really narrowing down to what are the diagnostics that actually matter and that are actually going to be a catastrophic failure or show that there's something major going on that's not just a nuisance.
mm. Yeah, I like that. That spawned a couple questions for me, that I wrote down. But before we go much further, I'm familiar with the AGV market a little bit,
Yep.
but could you help the listeners understand what that is?
Sure. So, for simplification purposes, it's effectively robotic movement systems to handle inventory of some sort. So, what we produce at JBT, it can be in a variety of applications, and they are different robots, but they're basically robot vehicles that interface into a customer system to accomplish a movement of inventory, right? So it can be
Mm,
everything from, you know, a warehouse moving from a you know a truck bed to a shelf, or in some of our applications, it can be moving a food cart in a hospital from the cafeteria to the hallway on floor 6 in a hospital.
yeah,
So it's all about automating the movement of inventory, and with that, it's about setting up systems that are able to cohabitate with humans in their interactions, so that
mhm,
it is a safe operation, but to help support maybe removal or adjustment of certain manual tasks that would have gone on at certain operations, and then as an output of that, you can have potentially a more efficient operation, and you can have a safer operation because you're taking out that human element.
yeah. Now, what's actually like interesting about you guys at JBT and this stuff, like I hear like, whether it's like a warehouse, a hospital, whatever, like,
Mhm.
hey, like I have like a totally automated robot run warehouse, like to someone out on the street or like me, I'm like, holy cow, robots? Right? Like this
Right,
is like cutting edge. Like, I just have the one annoying robot that gets in my way at the grocery store.
right.
But you guys have actually been in this game for a while. Like this is not, came out yesterday stuff for you.
No, right, yeah, no. So we've been in the AGV business for over 30 years, and
That's
it's
crazy.
yeah, it's significant, and honestly, like some of the bigger challenges that we've had is just more of evolving with like, as the technology stack has evolved, just because we've had systems in place for a long time, and we have a lot of customers and stuff like that that have been in operation for 15 plus years, and the technology's evolved, and we have to get them upgraded. So just as things, go obsolete and then are harder to support from a hardware and software standpoint.
Yeah. That's interesting. I also, when I think of a lot of the data processes that I've interacted with, they're all fairly human, right? With the exception of
Mhm.
the IoT space that you talked about. And
Yep.
when you start going to this place of, robots, much higher levels of automation, using IoT for everything,
Mhm.
that puts you kind of in this situation where, if I'm a mom and pop store, I have my inventory, I have my point of sales, I have my cost information, that kind of stuff. Like, that's a very manageable data size.
Right.
Whereas for really like any type of, big capital project or any type of like fully automated operation, the quantity of data that it you have to sift through in order to find, if I can steal Nate Silver's book title, right, the signal out of the noise
Mhm.
gets harder and harder. So how are you guys handling, the quantity of data that it takes to do that stuff well?
Yeah, so that's really driving a lot of the, technology stack migration that we're in the middle of right now, and just to even give you a little bit more light to that is that we've gone from systems like maybe 15 years ago, we'd be seeing 10 to 15 robots in an operation, and now it's, we've got several operations where there's 100 to 200 plus robots all being coordinated within a system. And so, which challenges to, how we're structured within our databases, and how we handle the data and what data is actually relevant. And obviously some of that stuff is like getting into, time series type database interfaces, and being able to use a lot of the modern tool set that's out there, that enables us to get into, like, some of the advanced features of AI and ML that,
Mm,
that we may have not have touched in the past. So yeah, I mean, it's about having that scalable architecture, and it's also about, um, really making some decisions where, I can say, I've had discussions here with the overall technical team of things that were made as a decision like maybe 15 years ago that doesn't actually translate to a lot of value for the customer, and that we were always transmitting this huge amount of data to really kind of help facilitate, this extremely high fidelity information all the time, and really kind of scaling it so that, in the future, we'll have top level visibility. But if they really want to get into the nuts and bolts of it, um, we're really kind of having like a secondary viewing that
mm,
allows to get into that high fidelity data, especially, and that's typically more needed for when the customers are going through like a debug type operation, or optimization, normal day to day stuff. They're not
yeah.
they're not really looking at that. So it's about maybe removing that massive amount of data, storage and transmittal when it's not necessarily needed. And it's about thinking about, because the easy answer for data is always just save it off. Who cares? Computational
Yeah.
power cheap, data's cheap. Well, you can find a way to max things out even with, today's modern architectures and
Yeah,
hardware that's out
200
there. I mean,
robots. Yeah, that's yeah.
right, right, exactly. And the other thing though too is like as this stuff gets bogged down, you know, if you don't have the right data coming through, you're not able to really truly sense a true problem and an operational problem. We don't want to have excessive information that is being presented to the customer that, um, translates to confusion. I mean, one of the things that we're really working to here at JBT now is to, um, move away from, um, some of the stuff where it would sit in a control room and we'd have an application that is showing the movement of all the robots going on, and that you see one robot jammed up and it has like 10 robots behind it. Well, you don't actually necessarily know where all that stuff is, what the root cause of it is. And then, so it's about driving to having more, you know, okay, hey, we know with these particular scenarios, that means robot one is causing the jam up of all these other 10. So if you
Yeah.
didn't have to look at robot one, you weren't going to see where the problem is.
Mm,
And really giving context to that data so that the customer can then go and say, hey, oh, I better go out there on the floor and fix that problem with robot one, and then the rest of these problems will go away. So that's a lot of what we're trying to go to, is rather than, you know, needing to have somebody with like a computer science degree or electrical engineering degree to be able to go through, figure out what's going on, that the system's really given more context, and then there's less complication that people have to go through.
Yeah. You know what's cool to me about this is like as if like, you know, a robot warehouse isn't like futuristic and cool enough. I love like hearing that you guys are like constantly thinking about how to keep it more cutting edge and how to like upgrade everything, how to incorporate the new stuff from AI and ML,
Right.
incorporating the new, kind of ways of thinking about data mining, especially as like the quantities of the
Right.
underlying sensor data get out of control. That's really cool to me. I mean, obviously with, ChatGPT and LLMs, I think like AI has really blown up in
Yeah.
public discussion.
Yeah.
My experience from a data perspective is, yeah, that's awesome. This is super cool. But like, hey, there's all of these other categories of artificial intelligence out there. Like all of, we have, random forests and, clustering and, all these like even just, regressions and things like
Mhm.
that. There are just so many other cool tools in the toolbox. Um, how are you guys kind of reckoning with the AI revolution, and what are your thoughts about how, like, even separate from JBT, like, how can an organization approach thinking about this stuff?
Um, well, I mean, yeah, so I think like the whole chat GPT thing is its own beast. And, internally we have a path for that. And I think there's a bunch of stuff that you can do, in particular for servicing vehicles and stuff like that, where you can have more intelligence,
Mhm.
like server type bots that you type in and say, okay, I have this problem. What could it be? Where it can really understand your literature and be able to extract out, answers for that. I think that's separate from, you know, where we see like things like AI and ML applying to our overall operations. So for example, I'd say, you know, today we have some, we're in the process of a major technology migration right now, platform wise. As that gets more complete, we're going to be able to take on a little bit more in that space. So I'd say right now, we're in a migration path, and again, this is typical of what happens when you have a organization that's been doing it very well for 30 plus years. That
Yeah.
that you have tech that you have to evolve from. But that said, I think, where I think the big wins in that data mining space and really applying the artificial intelligence is like understanding um, predictive wear. Definitely similar to what I was talking about with the semiconductor world that I've dealt with, is that
Mhm.
there's definitely some parallels with that. I mean, capital equipment's capital equipment.
Yeah.
It's all about making sure that it stays up and that the customer is able to make money with. And then also on the artificial intelligence side is that I think, for now, when you think of like an AGV system,
Mm.
when it's moving around in a warehouse, for example, it's really like the part of the deployment is it's spending the time to lay out the train tracks, for
Yeah.
lack of a better term, of like
Yeah.
really doing all the path planning that is the same and that is predictable, which also makes it one of those systems that you know where the robot's going. So, you're not gonna go jump in front of a forklift that's fully loaded. You shouldn't be going run in front of a AGV that's fully loaded, right? It'll stop, but there's physics that you got to fight. So the interaction with that, there's certain levels of safety that we have to consider within the operation. But that said, as far as optimization, I think there's a lot of opportunity for applying some of the AI algorithms to really say, hey, what is the most efficient way of moving around the pieces of inventory in here, in terms of maybe space optimization
Mm.
or time of flight for the operation, so that you don't have, and reducing the number of moves of inventory. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff that we're currently kind of just cracking the shell on. but we'll definitely be making this something very robust and viable for our end customers.
Yeah, that's, at least to me, I think a great use case that's very generalizable to so many different areas of business.
Sure.
Like you talk about, okay, I'm imagining, I keep using the warehouse. I know you guys put them in lots of places, but
Yeah, yeah, that's all
yeah,
good.
um, okay, so like I have a warehouse and I have one robot,
Hmm.
right? Really easy with train tracks to be like, what's the shortest path from A to B?
Right.
But now when I have 200 robots and I'm trying to figure out how to totally optimize that whole system, and they all can't be in the same place and running through one another at the same
Sure.
time, this turns into the type of logistics problems that everybody has everywhere.
Right.
And it's the type of problem that, as you said, there are like really cool, um, models that can be built that
Hmm.
are, it's still AI. It's not ChatGPT. It's not a large language model, but there's so many cool tools that are out there. When I hear people talk about AI, that's kind of one of my big takeaways is like, yeah, that's great. And look at all this other cool stuff that can be done. So it's really exciting that you guys are moving down um that route.
Yeah.
Um if I can if I can pivot a little bit away
Sure.
from the AGV workspace, you know, you talked about how kind of capital equipment is capital equipment. And
Right.
I've done, quite a few projects, whether it's, building refineries or purchasing large pieces of equipment and then putting them into use. Like, you really talked a lot about how, you know, uptime and
Right.
productivity are kind of your key factors.
Mhm.
So, how have you seen the availability, quantity, quality of data change your ability to achieve those goals over time?
Um, yeah, I mean, it's I could I worked for Caterpillar for 15 years,
Mhm.
and I was heavily involved with a lot of the uh, IoT type initiatives there, and really driving to get um, extraction of data from equipment, and a lot of it was in the space of retrofitting technology onto existing fleets.
Mhm.
And one thing I could say that was like fairly interesting is like when we introduced a fuel consumption measurement system in that space,
Mhm.
we were really able to, and we were able to retrofit that onto um, old mechanical engines and stuff that wouldn't have normally had that type of data available. Really help a lot of customers understand where they had wasted money in terms of like where the engines were operating, whether or not it was in, something like a generator set application or, even just like oil and gas type application like frac rigs or well service workover rigs. Really understand where the waste is. And also as a side note too, being able actually to detect things like theft. So some really interesting problems that you can help solve your customer, and that's with a relatively low amount of data and low bandwidth of data coming back. It's really just more of like how much fuel just got used. So it's really interesting that if you
Yeah.
narrow in with a very specific um, you know, problem, you're going to be able to extract some meaning out of that. And it's about like really understanding where the data that has value is. So, and so it's just, it's fascinating when you really get into it because you go, it's all about, simplicity. It's just, that
Yeah.
simple answer is going to really, in a lot of cases, really be where the root of it is. But sometimes there's value in doing a little bit of a shotgun approach, feeding a ton of data into it and see
And
what you learn from it. And then and that might point you in the direction of where you actually saw something simple being the answer, but this actually helped you validate that.
yeah, really cool use cases. I most of the time I always think of, a lot of the IoT stuff as being like temperatures and positions and pressures and all that stuff, but like making it so tangible is just like, cool, yeah, you have this huge fleet. Like how much fuel is it all using?
Yeah.
Um, that's the type of analysis that like, you put that up for a week and it's like bang, bottom line impact immediately.
Right.
It's so
Exactly.
cool.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's like, yeah, it's not just simple sensors. There's a lot of stuff that you can get through it. Also, it's sensor fusion, right? So you can go and take multiple sensors
Mm,
and be able to understand what's happening here. Is this something that we're starting to see based off of several sensors, as pressure and temperature sensors in a hydraulic system? Um, are we starting to see a pump that's nearing failure, and stopping that catastrophic repair, that you can go and say, all right, if you take the downtime now of half a day for your equipment and replace it, it's better than being down for 6 weeks when everything blows up and spreads through your entire system with contamination. Like that type of thing, and that
yeah.
could be pumping you know hydrofluoric acid in the semiconductor industry, or it could be hydraulic fluid. It doesn't matter. The types of problems are similar.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very cool. I mean, like you said, right, you gotta do it. I'm imagining some kind of big piece of equipment, and it's like, it's always gonna break down in the least
Right,
convenient location, and it's like, "All right,
right,
well, shut the whole place down, let's get a crane in here, get it out of there." It's like, "Oh, well, if we know it's gonna fail, we'll just drive it over to the maintenance
right,
facility." Bang.
right. And it's all about so for it's all about productivity, right? So if
Mm,
you can really get that planned maintenance, you can optimize the maintenance, right? It's about getting to understand where, rather than just going by the default of X number of hours or X number of miles of operation that we service this, you can go and say, hey, look, maybe you can get more um, life out of your oil by understanding what are the conditions that it faced during its operation, and then maybe you get double the lifetime out of it, and that translates to less downtime, because that's one less oil change, and also then that's less chemical being wasted. There's a lot more from a sustainability standpoint,
100%.
that's very important today in today's world, that we're doing whatever we can so that we stop waste.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very cool. It's What an awesome answer, man. Like, that's such like a win-win-win, you know what I mean? Like,
Right,
the clients are winning, you're winning, the environment's winning,
right.
people are making like, it's just, like, all around better when you have clear, complete information and you're capable of making good decisions. Holy cow, like, look how amazing everything gets.
Right,
Now
right, yeah, exactly, and you may see something that you thought was not optimized before, maybe actually more of a true value operation than you ever thought before,
yeah,
because now you actually have true data to correlate it with, rather than kinda top level operational, "Oh, yeah, that looks like that's okay, but, oh, you know what? I need a bigger piece of equipment running there,"
yeah.
and it may not be the case that that translates to, something more efficient.
Yeah, I mean, like, sticking with the title of the podcast, "Making Better Decisions," I have encountered a lot of people who know that they have decisions to make,
Mhm.
but it is really cool to, like, hear use cases like that, and then also to have, kinda work through the process with some of those people, and you find out how, you know of course, like, sure, well, at the team lunch, should we have, ham sandwiches or chicken salad, right? Like, well, that's a decision, right? But
Right.
then, like, really realizing if we get structured around, like, this data-driven decision-making mindset, like,
Mhm.
how massive the impact can be. Now, there's one thing that we can't go past without me asking about it. So, I know that, Caterpillar sells a lot of different types of equipment, but when you said theft, I'm imagining somebody stealing like one of those like gigantor dump trucks or something like that. Like,
Right.
does that happen? Like someone driving a backhoe down the highway to try and get
Oh,
away with
sure,
it?
sure, yeah, yeah, yep.
Wow.
That does happen, yeah. Um, you know, obviously, I don't think someone's gonna take out it's as easy to take out like a 400-ton mining truck, but, Yeah, no, that was a common problem in that industry. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially more of a in the building construction product space.
Yeah.
So
That's wild, but again, what data to the rescue. I'm glad that, sensors and, accurate lower latency reporting has made that less of an issue.
yeah, well, and even to that aspect too is like there's been aspects in other industries that I've worked in is that you really got to have some a certain amount of tamper detection too, because data powered. If you have something that happens at a particular site where the capital equipment's being used, whether or not it's a you know prescription fill in IV robot, or a large scale freeze dryer. If certain things aren't being done correctly, you really need to have that traceability so that you can really understand. Okay, is this actually a machine operation problem, or is this something that is due to maybe malintent or maybe a misunderstanding or lack of training, right? So there's a certain amount of things you can get out from that too. Is like you see as these people use this equipment, you're seeing that okay, one operator has this particular amount of consumption of product which translates to a certain amount of product output. The next person comes through and there's like 20% less efficient. Why is that?
Mm,
Right? And that you can get a lot of interesting information from and insight from it that before it would just be more of like, okay, person A is just happens to be better at operating that machine.
mm,
Well, now we can kind of go and say, well, why, right? Or
mm,
is there something that we need to change from an operations standpoint with the way that we operate this equipment to get that true efficiency. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff you can get in that space. I don't think people were looking at even, 5, 10 years ago.
yeah, that is unbelievably cool, as a use case, just thinking, you know what I immediately thought of was I was like, "Wow, that sounds cool for me." Like, I would love if, like, the things that I'm doing, like, they could tell me how to improve, and then I thought about it, I was like, "You know what we really need that for? We need to put that in everybody's car, and when they're driving crazy, it pops up, and it's like, you need to go back to driving lessons."
Well, there's already a certain amount of that, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
um, there's like yeah, rental cars, or even my own car. Like if you've been driving on the road for a road trip for like an hour and a half, and it notices that you're adjusting away from the lane detection a
Yeah.
couple times, it'll pop up and say, "Hey, time for a break." I mean,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
things like that. It's all showing up, but yeah, I mean, and that's really the question here, and we get into like kind of the data privacy concerns and stuff like that that kind of come in that space. But if you can navigate that effectively and make sure that people are really aware of what's being done from a data standpoint,
Mm.
there's a lot of great things that can kind of come out of it. Um, and yeah, potentially we can go and detect when people are potentially going to be hurting someone.
Yeah. That's very cool. That's also a very interesting point that you bring up between kind of the trade-off between value and security. Really is, this was a handful of years back now, but I think it was, it was really starting to like come out like just how much of, you know, our personal information is stored on the internet and is stored by all these companies. And
Right.
there was a lot of, public talk about it. And I remember listening to, I think it was a podcast that an executive at Google, like one of their, privacy and security types there
Sure.
was came out and made this statement that kind of like totally flipped it on its head, right? Like I was expecting him to just kind of be like, "Oh, we don't have any of your data," right? And he was like, "We totally do, right? We have Chrome, we have Android, we have your search history, we have all of these
Mhm.
things." And he said that our goal is to only use that information to provide you value. And so
Mhm.
what we want is we want to be transparent with you, and we want to make sure that you feel like you got a suitable or an exceeding amount of value for the amount of privacy that you are willing to give up for us.
Right.
And, I thought that, the idea that just like no information is going to be on the internet, like I think that ship sailed. That's never going to happen.
Right, yeah. It's there.
Yeah,
It can
but like you were talking about that it's really just about saying, okay, I realize that you gave me something. You're giving me some of your information. How can I add value to that so that it's worthwhile for you?
right, right.
That's very, very cool. Now, I also want to, in addition to getting like some of the best data use cases that I've heard on the podcast so far, I also want to give everybody an opportunity to get to know you a little bit. So tell me a little bit about yourself. What do what's your background? What do you like doing outside of work?
Alright, well, let's well, I maybe can give you my life story here or
All
where
right,
however
cool.
you wanna
Fire
run this.
away.
So, yeah, so I'm a Canadian citizen. I, grew up in Alberta, Canada. Went to the University of Alberta for my electrical engineering degree. Career-wise, I've worked on, like I alluded to before, every piece of, capital equipment, I think, in the world at some point. I, I I started out early on in my career, working, on, unmanned aerial vehicles. So, worked for a startup in the, Pacific Northwest area that eventually got, purchased by, Boeing for a military application. Um then like I said, I spent 15 years working for Caterpillar, doing a bunch of stuff, starting out in electrohydraulic controls, uh, transmission controls, doing a lot with oil and gas application transmissions, frac rigs, well service workover rigs. And then went over to, I was based in Australia and Asia Pacific for 3 years and covered a lot of custom non competitive equipment to Caterpillar. So everything from salt harvesting machines to sugarcane hauling locomotives to foundation drills, uh, and even had like uh, I even worked on a rail service locomotive in Indonesia that was used by the Ministry of Rail there that actually had a full karaoke system in the middle of it. So, so you could actually run the karaoke while you're heading down the track and inspecting the track. Um, did that. Later, you know, then came back to US and ran like a retrofit and upgrade group relative to kind of helping deal with legacy electronics and getting current technologies up there for things like a lot in the generator set space, and then also to getting on IoT type sensor technologies onto customer equipment to really extract information. From that, worked in the semiconductor industry for a while. Was engineering manager of a group that did batch wet process equipment. So uh, so basically, spray acid tools, spray ozone tools, and spray solvent tools, primarily used for the creation of like MEMS sensors, LEDs, power electronics. A lot in the 8-inch wafer space, which has kind of got a resurgence
Mm.
as a lot of technologies have become more relevant again. Um, and then the last little while before I came to JBT, working in the biomedical world, worked on uh, large scale lyophilizers and vial fill finish lines for a while, and then for a period of time worked on a system that was automatically prepping IV bags and syringes for hospitals, pharmacies, and then. But like I said, it's all
I
the
thought
the
that was an
need.
example you just pulled out of the air, man. You actually did
No,
it.
no,
You've done
no, really,
everything,
yeah,
dude.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Literally, that's a product that I did manage a team development on that. So, um, but yeah, and then and then kind of coming into the AGV world, but then from a personal standpoint, I love to travel. I'm a being Canadian and filling this the stereotypes. I play hockey at least a couple times a week.
Yeah, there you go.
Big fan, and obviously I'm a huge Oilers fan. So it's been a rough few years. So
You
go
got you
Oilers!
got you got an opportunity this year.
Yeah, I got an opportunity this year. Yeah, and then outside of that, I have have a 10-year-old daughter who is obsessed with figure skating, but I tried to get her to play hockey, and it just wasn't going to happen. So I took the consolation prize on the
At
figure
least she's still
skating.
on
But
the ice.
she's still on the ice, still loves it. So can't complain on that. So, but yeah, no, that's kind of me in a nutshell. But and, I'm always interested in interesting applications and how to solve hard problems. I mean, I think for me, my personal health or career wise is to be in a position where it's just the same thing day in day out, and it's just turning the crank. And so
Yeah.
a lot of where I've come into is just being in that incubation state for an organization or helping grow and modify an existing business to help them get to a growth stage. So
Yeah.
and yeah, so that's what excites me about JBT. I think there's a ton of opportunity here and a lot of growth prospects here and a lot of great fun and exciting customers here. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a great place here to work.
Yeah. You did. Even from talking to you, definitely have that problem solver engineer mindset. And it's, honestly, like, you really have worked on just about everything out there. Like, very, very cool. You've gotten to tinker with a lot of cool stuff.
Oh, for sure.
Very interesting. And um I also thought that it was very cool how you were able to kind of like intertwine all of those to talk really generally about how, those processes have evolved and how they're starting to use data.
Right.
Um, talking hockey just a little bit. The Bruins had a good game in game 1 for the second round. So,
Yeah.
hopefully we see you guys soon. That'll be a good game.
Yeah, no, it'd be interesting to be back to the like the 1990 Stanley Cup final here.
Yeah.
And it's kind of wild, but and then obviously I have to deal with all my fellow Canadian Maple Leafs fans out there that have continued to suffer, but
Yeah, we took care of them.
yeah, you did take care of them, so I don't I'm not complaining, but
They put up a heck of a fight though.
yeah, absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, the shot off the rear boards sometimes works out.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously you have, a ton of really cool experience and like a brain full of kind of awesome use cases and all that stuff. If a listener wants to reach out, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'd say just shoot me a message on LinkedIn,
Hmm.
add me. I don't mind if you got some, you know, crazy idea you want to run past me. I'm all ears and whatnot. And yeah, kind of reach out. I get all sorts of interesting people that contact me and we have some conversations and see where it goes. I mean, you never know.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Darren, you thank you so much for sharing the time and some of your experience and thoughts. It was really, really very cool to get the opportunity to learn a little bit from you about all this stuff. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. This has been an experience, and obviously, I get to break in my podcast. I have a microphone here in my office, so and all my coworkers can stop laughing at me. And although I'm sure they'll ridicule me after this podcast,
I don't think
so
so, man. You sounded pretty smart to me.
oh, so don't worry. The one thing about me that you may not know is like I like to bust people's chops a little bit. So anytime we get an opportunity to get a jab in at me, they take it. So
Yeah,
it's
absolutely. Well, that's good fun, man. I like that.
yeah,
I also
absolutely.
I also want to make sure that I thank the audience. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you like something, you laughed, you want to tell Darren that he should pick a different hockey team to be a fan of, please make sure to tell somebody else to come listen to this podcast. Give us a like, give us a rating. Hopefully, one of the 5-star ones. Darren, thank you again so much for coming on, man. And this has been another exciting episode of Making Better Decisions. Thanks.
Thank you.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Making Better Decisions. For show notes and more, visit makingbetterdecisions.live. A special thank you to our sponsor, Canopy Analytic. Canopy Analytic is a boutique consultancy focused on business intelligence and data engineering. They help companies make better decisions using data. For more information, visit canopyanalytic.com. There's a better way. Let's find it together and make better decisions. Thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you next week. Peace.